Thank you for those words of greetings, Miss Oliphant. Restorative justice has been around, as I said earlier, for quite some time, and the program has some real dedicated officers delivering the service right across the island as the ministry seeks to expand the program and make its contribution to assisting us as citizens of Jamaica in settling our disputes. At this time, I'm going to invite Mrs. Lilith Smith and Mr. Dowell Williams, Restorative Justice Officers from the parish of St. Anne and Portland, respectively, just to come forward and tell us some more about the restorative justice process. Could you welcome them? Thank you.
Just in case.
Just in case. Right, go ahead.
See, it's not showing.
Come on. Go on, tell me.
All protocols observed. Pleasant morning, everyone. Restorative Justice 2022. Through the Governor General's proclamation in 2007, the Ministry of Justice observed Restorative Justice Week annually in the first week of February. The week is used as an opportunity to inform and educate the general public about restorative justice, RJ, build public support and invite community to participate and collaborate with the government in implementing this effective model of justice. Restorative Justice Week 2022 commenced on January 30th, 2022 under the theme, Crime Prevention through Restorative Justice is Everyone's Business.
And we could not give this overview without letting you know what restorative justice is, so that you in your communities can make the distinction from time to time and know what is a restorative case and what might be one for mediation, and etc. All right? So restorative justice is a process whereby all the parties with a stake in a particular offense come together to resolve collectively or to deal with the aftermath of the offense and its implication for the future. So this is basically saying that the parties, highlighted first, would come together. Who are the parties? Very important as a distinction. In restorative justice, we have three parties and not two. We have the offender, the victim, and the community. Very important. The community must be there as well to help with reintegration of the offender back into that community. Because of the aim, which I'm going to speak to now, when we sit what we aim to do with that definition, we aim to build relationships. All right? And through repairing of harm, through forgiveness, through empathy. All right? And because of the nature of that, then it's a holistic kind of intervention which aims to have peace in a sustainable way. Hence, the critical role of using restorative justice in crime prevention and making it our business. As stated earlier, restorative justice has three parties. And when we say the victim, that's the individual who has been harmed. When we say the offender, the individual who has caused the harm. And when we say the community, the place where the harm was committed. So it cannot be excluded if we are going to build relationships.
Restorative justice vision, an improved and efficient justice system through the delivery of high-quality restorative justice practices across Jamaica, rebuilding relationships and communities by fostering empathy, healing, and accountability for all citizens. 2, institutionalized and evidence-based program to reduce the demands on the justice system and to reduce violence in communities and institutions such as schools, families, etc., just about everywhere, in order to effectively address the harm between individuals, groups, and communities.
In restorative justice, it's about, well, not only restorative justice, but the justice system. It's about balancing rights and responsibilities. And we are aware of the criminal justice system. Restorative justice is just a different way of doing things, adding to what exists. So when you look at the criminal justice system, you would see things, or you would note what law was broken, who broke it, how do we punish the person who would have done the harm. However, restorative justice, we are about what harm was done and to whom, what needs have arisen based on that harm, and whose obligation is it to meet those needs. It is what we call the fair process, explanation, expectation, clarity, and engagement. 3 E's.
Goals of RJ in Jamaica. It creates a culture of peace through effective processes that emphasize the values of mutual respect, dignity, care between one another in the environment of healing, reconciliation, and restoration. Empower individuals, groups, and community to respond in a positive manner to crime and wrongdoing and to harm offenders' cause, thus creating satisfactory outcomes which enable productive relationships. Reduce criminal backlogs by diversing cases to dispute resolution process at an early stage of conflict and to avoid escalation to violent reactions.
Also, it reduces recidivism.
Reduce recidivism by addressing underlying causes of criminal behavior and supporting the constructive reintegration of the offender into the community. Eliminate the reprisal culture by enabling individuals to have access to a dispute resolution process at an early stage of conflict and to avoid escalation of violence reactions.
All right. At this point now,
Sir, I have been given this letter from the court. I was sent here by the judge.
all right, thank you, ma'am. All right, we will be in touch with you as soon as we have done our, go through this referral, and we'll be in touch with the court in regards to
So you're
this
going to
referral.
call me, sir?
Indeed, we will.
Okay, thank you.
That which you would have seen, I want to explain the entry to the RJ program. All right? We start with the pre-charge, and that at that point, a referral can come from self, family, community, school, church, and even a recommendation from the police. All right? So anybody can refer to restorative justice at the pre-charge. Then, if you look at the post-charge, that our pre-trial, that's just before trial in a parish court. And referral can come from the judge at that level for offenses. All right? Also, in this program, we can get cases at the post-conviction stage. That is just before sentencing. But a trial would have been done, but before the sentencing. A judge can also refer a case to the restorative justice program. And at post-sentencing, at that stage, the person can also refer themselves, as well as the Department of Correction can do the referral. All right, so there are 4 stages, and at each stage, as explained on the slide, you can see where you can be a part of the program. And that's why the team would say crime prevention through restorative justice everybody's business, because you can make it your business by doing a referral as well. And in restorative justice, I like to say it's like a system. So you would know, like you have a computer system, you have the input, processing, and output. In restorative justice, we go through a system of quality assurance. And we start with receiving the referral, which you would have seen just now. But when we receive that referral, as you would have seen, what we do?
We conduct pre-meetings with the victim, the offender, and the community support. They have to consent to a program, the explanation of the principles, the process, the expectations, the agreements, and follow-up, explanation of the conference, attendees, and their roles. This gives the individuals an opportunity to sit together in a circle to discuss what has happened.
Then, when we would have done those strategic meetings, they are strategic because it helps with the planning for the next stage, which is our third stage. And we like to not say it's the most important, but it is our sit down. It's like where we do the work in the lab. All right? And at this stage, this is where we do our fair process. This is where you get the explanation. This is where you get the engagement. And this is where you get the expectation clarity. So we do story sharing in a dialogue. We have an open discussion with the victim, offender, and the community as well. And then our expectation clarity involves the agreement that they would come up with.
And because RJ is not only about the crime and violence that took place, but about relationship building, we monitor, we comply with the agreement, we follow up with our clients to see what has been happening. And of course, we do our follow-up with the court. We send back our referral reports, send back our reports and the agreement terms. And of course, we build a relationship by continuing to monitor our clients for 3 months.
After we would have done all our work in restorative justice, we have some expected outcomes that we aim to achieve at all times. We aim to create a safe space for offender and victim to dialogue. So we try to provide that so that the dialogue can be fruitful and they are in a setting of comfort, so that they are open and we can share most, if not everything. Because at the end, we want peace in a sustainable way.
We also respond to the victim needs for answers.
Healing and safety are directly addressed at all times.
Increases victim satisfaction.
Reduces offending and prevent reoccurrence of crime. This is very important, as if we are going to work at the aftermath of an offense, it is important that through our relationship building, we do not have what we call recidivism. That meaning we have in conflict between the two same persons again. It would mean that the intervention would have failed, and we're happy to say that maybe 95% or more of the time we do not have we do not have those two persons having conflicts again. So, as stated before, the aim for peace in a sustainable way would have been realized, and the impact is there to show.
At RJ, offenders are encouraged to reflect on their actions.
It's important to us to reintegrate and restore offender to become productive members of the community. Very important in our process of peace in a sustainable way.
Reduces high all desire.
And finally, reduce criminal case backlog for the courts. And this is very important. So for example, in Portland, in 2021, out of 200 agreements, we got 177 agreements from the court, which means that would indicate that 177 cases would have been removed from the court in Portland in 2021. And can you imagine the court alone doing 177 cases for 1 year?
Yes.
Answer that question for yourself. I want to thank you for having us. And You know, remember, crime prevention through restorative
The
justice
is
everybody's
everyone's
business. All right?
Thank you, Mrs. Smith and Mr. Williams, for explaining the process in a little more fulsome detail for those of us who need to have a better understanding of the program. At this time, I am going to invite Dr. Mark Thomas, Deputy Commissioner of Corrections, to bring some remarks from that department. Make him welcome, please.
Thanks, Madam Chairperson. And with all protocols observed, I greet you on behalf of the management and staff of the Department of Correctional Services. We wish you a successful conference and even greater success in expanding the reach of restorative justice. Working with Ms. Lindsay for the last year, and I must add that it's the first time seeing her in person as we, thanks to COVID. We have completed a pilot in the correctional services, and that led to us being able to develop an extensive project document that is guiding implementation as we speak. Just recently, we completed sensitization sessions with all our staff, and Monday coming, we'll start reaching the inmate population. The intent, of course, is to reach as many as possible with this most noble initiative. I can speak definitively on the matter because this is an essential component of our rehabilitation strategy within our larger crime-fighting mandate. I head the Rehabilitation and Probation Division, and I'm sure this room is well aware of what probation does. You know, across 16 offices, nearly 200 members of staff, 3,000 plus caseload. I'm sure you're well aware of what a dedicated team does. What you might be less aware in the 4 minutes I have is probably what the other side does in terms of our custodial side, in terms of rehabilitation. Our number one goal is to reduce recidivism, and we are very passionate about this. We are well aware that the fancy word, what it really means. It means one less rape, one less murder, one less case of wounding with intent, one less case of arson, and I could go on and on. And therefore, that is why we are passionate about this. And the good news is, we know how to do this. The science is very clear. Involvement in prison industries, remedial education, employment training and job assistance, vocational education, therapy, reduces your chance of reoffending from rates of 5 to 25 and higher %, depends on which study you read. So the science is very clear on this, and that guides our rehabilitation strategy. So we offer life skills, and for those who are not aware, that is teaching persons how to parent properly, how to engage in conflict resolution, etc., etc. We also include sports leisure, spiritual activities, academic training, vocational training, mentorship, and therapy, as I just mentioned. This is done across 11 correctional facilities. We have well over 3,000, almost 4,000 inmates presently. And in the, 2 minutes I have left, I could get into some more details. Welcome, Minister. Our academic areas are guided by the National Standards Curriculum and the Caribbean Secondary Education Certificate Syllabus. The adults are guided by the High School Diploma Equivalency Curriculum as well as the CSEC syllabus. And then vocational training is guided by the Hartrust NSTA. We have a wide variety of offerings: remedial reading, mathematics, life skills, social studies, art and craft, music, English, and I could go on. In CSEC, a long list as well: English, mathematics, social studies, history, accounts, principles of business, principles of accounts, office administration, electronic document preparation, human and social biology, and geography. and I stress that we have to go through the entire list because persons are just generally not aware as to the magnitude of the endeavor. And it's not just offering for offering's sake. Over the last couple of years, between 62 and 69% usually pass at least one CSEC subject. It says pause here for applause. That's it. I was kidding, but I'll take it. So at this very moment, 100% of our juveniles are engaged in academic activities. 100% are also engaged in vocational training. Over 300 adults in the inmate population are involved in academic training, and we'll have over 100 sit CSEC exams this year. Very important to note, and what many will not know as well, is that we will soon graduate our first batch of tertiary students. It's just 4 of them. But the 4 inmates and 2 correctional officers, they are almost ready to complete their associate degree program from UCC. And I'm also pleased to report, because of their A average and how well they have done, that they have paved the way for another batch that just started this semester. So at any given moment in our correctional service, there's an inmate learning how to read and write, there's another preparing for CSEC, and another taking a college course. You see, I train them well. Now, in terms of vocational activities, the vast majority participate in vocational training, and we have just around 20 vocational options: auto mechanic, tailoring, food and nutrition, barbering, agriculture, floral arrangement, art and craft, carpentry, welding, masonry, data operations, cosmetology, plumbing, beaded jewelry, mixology. 76 inmates currently are involved in mass production, churning out over 7,000 cloth masks to aid in our fight against COVID in the population. Over 60 inmates this year alone were certified in landscaping and may qualify for what we call a rehab grant, that they could leave with a walker to start their business immediately as they walk through the door. COVID hit our agriculture program hard, but thanks to the work of the team, we can boast that for the first time we produce all of the chickens we consume for the first time in history. In fact, we are actually underproducing. We just simply don't have the staff or the space to maintain higher levels. So in the 5 minutes I have, that's where I'll leave it. But I'm hoping you get how it all ties in, that we want the persons in our care to leave educated, enlightened in terms of how to resolve a conflict, having a skill, and then go back to our receptive community. So please help us join together to ensure that this happens. So let me end by saying, just wishing you all the best in this most noble initiative. Thank you so very much.
Thank you for those remarks. Dr. Thomas, another of our key stakeholders in the Restorative Justice Program. At this time, I would like to recognize Honorable Xavier Main, Minister of State in the Ministry of National Security, who has just joined us, sitting in for the Honorable Horace Chang. And of course, I also would want to recognize Custos Pitkin, who has traveled all the way from St. James to be with us today. Our custodies are also some of our most fervent supporters, and they support the Ministry of Justice in all our endeavors. Thank you, Custos Pitkin and Custos Green, for being here, and of course, Honorable Custos Hugh Gentles, representative. At this time, I am going to be inviting another Energizer Bunny in the justice system, and she is Ms. Paula Llewellyn, CDQC, Director of Public Prosecutions. She will address us at this time.
Thank you very much, Madam Permanent Secretary. All protocols observed. Good morning, everybody. But I must greet Custis Pitkin, and I also see Mr. Lloyd Distant, head of CMOC, that's a Crime Monitoring Oversight Committee. And you know, I have to single out these two gentlemen because I have issued telepathic invitations for them to join me in the trenches so that they can understand what prosecution, the burden that we have. And by the way, I'm not owned an Energizer bunny, but if you look closely enough, you'll see the word beast of burden on my forehead. Let me also greet Miss Carla Galotta, who is one of the activists that hold the office of the DPP, our feet to the fire. And I can say to you in that hot matter, we will be coming out with a ruling, which I recommend to Indicom, should be shared with the public, and we're trying to make sure that it's very thorough, very detailed, so that you can understand our methodology. I'm all for transparency and accountability as a beast of burden in the public service. Now, as you're all aware, the office of the DPP is a prosecuting service. Our role as prosecutors are to put up the best available evidence that is cogent, credible, reliable, relevant, and admissible in proof of our case. But also, ethically and as a matter of law, if we have a file or we have a case and according to law, we do not see a viable case, then notwithstanding the court of public opinion not only nipping at our heels, threatening to decapitate us, put us through the guillotine, we are obliged to act according to law. But what I hope I've been able to bring in my tenure is a great respect for transparency, so that when you are going to argue with me or disagree with me, you will disagree in an informed way, having read our opinion on law. And I can make myself and members of my staff available, and I do, to make sure that we inform the public in respect of issues of law and our methodology in terms of our critical analysis. And I hope we have been doing a good job of doing that. But I really would entreat you, where you see us issuing written opinions to the public, please read it and discuss it with us. We have no problem with that. Now, I see that the theme for today is crime prevention through restorative justice is everybody's business. And as I reflected on this theme and the whole concept of restorative justice, which I have read about with the assistance of the research of my legal officer, we operate in an adversarial system. And there are distinct differences between the adversarial system and what the restorative justice system is all about. And I pause here because although all protocol has been observed, I think I also have to greet Minister Delroy Chuck, who is following us online, and also greet former, yes, he's the leader of the opposition, but I really greet him here as former Minister of Justice, Mr. Mark Golding, who Minister Xavier Main just said a while ago, you know, when I was looking up and researching the policy, I saw your face on it. So, you know, this is the sort of thing that you would like to have across administrations, where our ministers, our policymakers can join together and maintain policy that is good for Jamaica. And I want to thank you, Mr. Golding. I want to thank Minister Chuck. And, okay, you get some thanks to Mr. Main, although you just come. All right? But it is a wonderful thing to see as a Jamaican, and long may it continue, Mr. Golding. Thank you. Yes, the difference between the adversarial system and restorative justice. For example, crime is defined as a violation of rules or law and a harm to the state. With restorative justice, crime is seen as a harm to the victim and communities. Adversarial system, the victim is inhibited from speaking about his or her losses and needs or the trauma. They are invited only to make a statement and deal with irrelevant issues. Restorative justice, the victim is central to the process of defining the harm and how it might be repaired. Adversarial system, the offender, victim, and community remain passive and have little responsibility for resolution. Restorative justice, the offender, victim, and community are active and participate in the resolution resulting from the restorative forum. And I pause here because the fact that in the adversarial system, the offender and victim and community remain passive and have little responsibility for resolution has caused and fostered the multi-headed hydra of retaliation, revenge, jungle justice, which is what breeds more crime. And the elephant in the room, as far as we are concerned, is that you will have elements of some communities who then accommodate criminality, so that when a lot of persons are saying, what is the police doing? Where's the police? For those of you who are not in the trenches, you would not understand that you have structures in the DNA of the community that ensure that the guns, the bloody clothes, the ill-gotten gains, that there's almost like a community conspiracy to hide these things. And we have to talk about it. I find that sometimes the political class shy away from it because some of these wrongdoers are relatives of the persons who are trying to do good in their constituency. Well, I'm so happy. I'm just a humble prosecutor. So, gentlemen, I can talk about it. Okay? So, that is there. So, the restorative justice program has to be conscious, I think, of the fact of the community and what is the culture of the community. And you have to really not only reach out to the individuals, but also members of the community, the families of the individuals, whether victim or accused. Because I have spoken to complainants, I have spoken to victims, I have spoken to family members, both of the accused and of the complainant. And you will find that that seat, that almost cancer, psychological cancer of wanting to have revenge and retaliate. Sometimes it does not rest with the victim or the accused. It rests with family members who feel that they must get their pound of flesh. And then voila, we have another murder coming from the original matter. So restorative justice is very important in easing that pressure cooker in the community at large. Also, in the adversarial system, the community's role is limited. In restorative justice, the community is actively involved in holding the offender accountable, supporting the victims, and ensuring the opportunities for offenders to make amends. In the adversarial system, restitution is rare. In the restorative justice system, restitution is normal. In the adversarial system, it is controlled and operated by the state and professionals who seem remote. Well, as a prosecutor, I have tried in the trenches to be less than remote. We have to be objective. We have to be clinically objective, but at the same time, we have found that in the current environment where you have this informer for dead and I don't want to be an informer, we have to sometimes challenge and give the tough love to some of the witnesses to get them to see the light in terms of participating in the process. In the restorative justice system, it is overseen by the state, but usually driven by communities. In the adversarial system, the offender is blamed, stigmatized, and punished. In the restorative justice system, the long-term protection of the public mandates a focus on the methods of problem solving that include the reintegration of the offender into the community and preservation of his dignity. Now, as I reflected on the theme, I can recall 2 small cases of murder that I did in the early years when I was half the size as a prosecutor. 2 cases that affected me a lot in terms of perhaps looking back that restorative justice could have prevented the tragedies. One, a case in Montego Bay when I was on circuit where a brother, after an argument with another brother over a scandal bag, one brother killed the other brother. And do you know who had to give the evidence? The mother of both accused, the accused and the deceased. And right there in the witness box when I was eliciting the evidence from her, she broke down. So one child is dead and the other child was convicted for manslaughter. It was very sad. And when I spoke to her, she told me that they would always get into conflicts and squabbles, but they just didn't seem to know how to work it out. And the environment did not foster conflict resolution. And then we had this issue. And another case I also did in Montego Bay, where an accused, he couldn't have been more than 20, and he was convicted for manslaughter too, on a murder indictment, for killing his grandmother. The grandmother had her home in the bush, you know, rural Jamaica. And this young man, he didn't go to school. He lacked education. He didn't hear his grandmother. And what he would do from time to time is steal some of her food and then cook a pot or run a boat in the bush. And on this occasion, the grandmother discovered him in the bush. And his pot was on the fire, cooking his stuff. And she used a stick and threw out, everything. And he got so angry. I don't know if it's because he was hungry. And he used a knife and literally stabbed her in such a way that he severed one breast of his grandmother, who grew him when he was convicted. So I thought of those 2 cases, and I thought to myself that where you have this sort of discord and conflict, that perhaps restorative justice could, because this young man had had an interface with the law prior to the murder or the manslaughter involving his grandmother. So, ladies and gentlemen, restorative justice is really grounded in the understanding that crime causes harm to people and relationships and also affects the community. And as was said earlier, the 3 main parties of the restorative justice process are victims of the crimes, the offender community, the place where the crime is committed. What I have always believed is that the concept of restorative justice could also aid psychologically in building what I like to term an alliance of the law-abiding. There is no community in Jamaica, irrespective of its socio-economic makeup, that is not that does not have the majority of members of that community being law-abiding persons. Isn't that so, Mr. Golding, Mr. Main? You are the political people. You believe so? You need to be more positive than that, Mr. Main. Well, I know so. And that is why what the Governor General says, that there is nothing wrong with Jamaica that what is right in Jamaica cannot fix, because the majority of people in every community are law-abiding. Isn't that so, Ms. Galata? Don't you find that? That the majority are law-abiding? So it is just the minority who are not law-abiding that we have to seek to deal with in terms of prevention of crime, or if there is crime at a particular level, we can neutralize its effects by using restorative justice. And of course, once it gets to a particular level, that's where my office takes over, and without fear or favor, we are going to do our job. So I just put that out there. The Dalai Lama said that the best way to resolve any problem in the human world is for all sides to sit down and talk. When I saw this phrase, Mr. Golding and Mr. Main, on behalf of Jamaica, I'll ask you gentlemen to remember that in the political class. The best way to resolve any problem in the human world is for all sides to sit down and talk. I know that Mr. Distant would agree with us. It is important that while offenders are punished, it is also critical that adequate steps are employed to ensure that offenders are afforded the necessary help to reintegrate into society. And I was heartened, Dr. Thomas, to hear what you had to say. I know about it, but it's always good to be kept up to date in respect of the efforts being made by the Corrections Authority to see to it that offenders are put in a position to want to become a member of the alliance of the law-abiding when they come back out into their community. And I share with you, I'm wrapping up now, a story. Although I am the DPP and I have on staff now some 58 lawyers, when I took over as DPP 13, 14 years ago, we only had about 23, 24. And I have fought, and I use that word, with the powers that be in terms of Mrs. the Madam Permanent Secretary would know, when I say bureaucracy, it's not with a positive tinge. I've fought with the bureaucracy because I realized that the volume of crime was going up so much, and I saw ahead what was happening, that we would need more staff. And even now, I'm still going to try and get some more staff. So I have gone from 20 odd, and I'm now at 58 lawyers, which perhaps is the largest chambers in Jamaica. Certainly one of in the Caribbean. But notwithstanding the great volume of work, I try to go into court because I believe that when you are in high office, you can't levitate up there, you won't know what is happening. You have to keep your feet on the ground because it is we who serve the public. It's not the public who serve us. So the only way for you to know what is happening is if you keep your feet on the ground and you are in the trenches. Now, I went into the gun court. So I do go on circuit occasionally. I go into the gun court, I prosecute. I'm in the Court of Appeal. So, extra burden, but I still have a passion for prosecution. And I'm not too bad at it. So I'm told. I'm a frustrated actress, so the courtroom is my natural theater. And I was in the gun court. Because what I'm telling you about is what I just said about how important it is when persons are in the correctional institutions, that it provides that stability and continues to help the person to grow and develop. I saw a 15-year-old young man whose mother, she stood near the door. Judge called her up because she had just turned in the surety. She had stood surety for her 15-year-old son, who was charged for illegal possession of firearm and gun recovered and shooting with intent. And she told the court that she cannot take it anymore. He doesn't listen to her. And she wants the court to take him back. And he can go back into the correction institution, which is Metcalf Street. So the judge and I looked at her, and the judge started to question her. Because we noticed that the body language of the young man, there was no regret, there was no remorse. And when the judge said to him, young man, do you see what is going to happen? You want to leave the comfort of your mother, being with your mother, to go back into the correctional institution? And he said, yes, ma'am. And she said, why? You know what he said, Miss Galata? Because it's too crowded. So the judge now started inquiries. It's too crowded. Then we noticed that the mother was standing up looking very defiant. So the judge asked her mother, how many persons do you have living where you live? She said it's a 2-bedroom in building so-and-so, flat so-and-so, and she bought it. So the judge asked her, how many children do you have? 9. She asked her, how old are you? 44. So she said, well, she has 9 children, but 3 of them don't really live at the house. The judge didn't even bother to ask her if she has grandchildren living there, because we know how it goes. And imagine that this young man of 15 preferred to go back to Metcalf Street rather than stay with his mother because he says it was too crowded. Now fancy that. So he went back into custody. The mother said rather defiantly, well, he's not listening to her. And I thought to myself, well, if you have a massive crowd there, and given how she appeared, if he is having problems, which is why he has no direction, he has become the quintessential unattached youth. So he picks up a gun. How does she hear him? How does she minister to him? 44 years old with 9 children. I've never seen something like that. An accused person, young person, opting to go back into state care in the correctional institution because his home was too crowded. And it was then, Dr. Thomas, I did a little investigation just to find out what are some of the courtesies that you offer there. And I gathered that you have a good program where you insist that these young people are schooled to the point of even doing exams. And I really want to salute you, and I hope that it is increased and further and even better resourced, because it is important. There are a lot of these, and I see complainants. You see the complainants, and that is why I have to keep it real. I was in Westmoreland last year for 3 weeks, and it blew my mind. I was there in the trenches with my junior counsel, talking to complainants, looking at what was happening there. And if may I say, looking at what I saw in the case files, I was not surprised to see what happened later, because you see, you talk to the police. And it is very, very heart-rending. Ms. Golota, I want to assure you that the DPP has a heart. But it's just that the law is a shackle, and I have to obey the law. So I have to have a split screen. You can be sympathetic to a situation, but on the other hand, you are bound by the law and the case law. So in wrapping up, I hope that I can say that restorative justice not only will minister to the individual, but in somehow, if you can also reach the personal circumstances of the families, of whether the victims or the accused, that would also help. I want to applaud the Ministry of Justice for continuing this program, putting resources into it, energizing it, and long may it continue, and I'd like to see it expand even further, because when it takes hold in the communities, then it's less work for the office of the DPP to prosecute. Because if you are able to neutralize the conflicts, if you are able to head them off and cause them to dissipate, then it won't stay there and fester and become a breeding ground for more hardcore crime that would come into my lap, so that when you look closely at my forehead, you see the words imprinted, beast of burden. I could also say jackass, but I think beast of burden is better. So I close with that wonderful saying that I love by Mahatma Gandhi: be the change you wish to see in the world. The Restorative Justice Program is worthy of the support of all in terms of their aims and objectives, and let us hope that this will help to build an alliance of the law-abiding in Jamaica, land we love. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Madam DPP. Told you she was the Energizer Bunny, and she said she uses the court as a stage where she carries out drama. So, DPP, you have another area to enter after you exit the courtroom. And indeed, DPP would have said what I was also about to say, that if we all make restorative justice our business, then of course we are certainly reducing the work, or the volume of work in the court, and for the DPP and the courts persons, for them to really focus on more serious matters, if we are able to head off some of these minor conflicts before they escalate to more serious criminal activities. And just to say also, yes, we intend to make the restorative justice practice and the ADR, as Minister refers to the programs, the main focus of activities in the ministry for the next fiscal year and onwards. And it is the intention to have the programs expanded across, that it becomes a household name, that as soon as a conflict arises, we all know how to address them and head them off. And just to say that he has asked me to share that he is indeed listening in. He has confirmed, I tell you, it's in his blood, he can't help himself. He needs to be a part of all the activities taking place in the ministry. All right, at this time, I'm going to invite Mr. Mark Golding, leader of the opposition. And as you heard, DPP said he also was a part of the beginning of restorative justice, being a former Minister of Justice in the ministry. And so I know that he is also one of the dedicated supporters of the Restorative Justice Program. Mr. Golding, can you come at this time and address us?
Yeah, I might do that. Thank you very much. P.S. Minister of State in the Ministry of National Security, Xavier Main, Madam DPP, our irrepressible DPP, other members of the head table, distinguished guests who are here, and I believe Minister Chuck, I'm told, is watching from somewhere afar. So, Delroy, thank you for inviting me to participate in this conference, and I hope things are going well for you wherever you are. I'm sure if you could be here, you definitely would. I just want to also big up Carla Galata, Rise Up Jamaica, you know. She has not, no. She has been a warrior for justice in the country for many, many years. And I think we need to recognize people who stand up for those who would otherwise not have a voice or become potential victims of a system that is not always a just system. You know, I think Jamaica really doesn't so much have a crime problem as it has a violence problem. And we have a violence problem because we have a tremendous propensity to use violence through an intemperate response to perceived disrespect or for vengeance. And of course, that often spills over into violent crime. We also have a justice problem in the society because there is a perception that there's a lack of equity in the society when it comes to how justice is administered, and that the system really favors those who have connections or resources, and those who do not get the short end of the stick and are often treated in a way which is more adverse, more painful for them and their families. That's why when I became Minister of Justice in 2012, I was very interested in developing the Restorative Justice Program. It had started previous to my becoming minister as a concept, but there was a great deal of work that was required for it to become policy and then law. And I want to just recognize Ruth Carey, who was then at the ministry with me, for her dedication both to restorative justice and to child diversion. She was in charge of both for a period of time and put in a lot of good work to develop that policy and to get both things going. And the policy document, some of which was described by our two presenters who are restorative justice practitioners, with the different points of entry, pre-charge, post-charge, post-conviction, and then ultimately post-sentencing as a structure through which persons can access restorative justice and restorative justice services. Because I would say in the spectrum of the justice system and of the way in which justice works in Jamaica, restorative justice is on the ultimate positive side of that spectrum. And that is because it's philosophically committed to the idea of healing, the idea of restoring relationships that have broken down, but where the persons involved recognize that the best outcome is to try and heal that and get back to a place where they can coexist and live together in their communities again. And that's ultimately based on brotherly and sisterly love and love for one another. So I see restorative justice as really emerging from a commitment to a loving outcome in a situation where love has broken down. Of course, the structure of restorative justice has traditionally been one in which it deals with what we call more minor offenses. You know, it's about accountability, but it's about accountability in a different way. In the justice system, ultimately, for more serious offenses, the state has an interest in holding the wrongdoer to account. And the state invests in trying to provide a fair system of adjudication that ensures that the rights, the natural rights of justice, natural justice, is upheld in the way that the criminal justice system deals with the case. But ultimately, as has been said by the DPP, the role of the criminal trial is about accountability to the state for the wrongdoing you have done, not to the victim, not to the victim's families. In restorative justice, it's about accountability to the victim and the community. And so it has a different focus and it has a different methodology. The reality of Jamaica is that the concepts and principles and the methodology of restorative justice can actually play a bigger role than was originally envisaged, because there are many instances in communities when serious offenses are committed, sometimes even murder, and yet if we don't have an intervention which seeks to cauterize and put an end to the feelings that that has produced, and when I say feelings, I don't mean bereavement. I mean feelings of a need for justice and accountability, which often means another act of violence, to make that appear to be the result in the minds of those who feel that they have been victimized by that first act of violence. If we don't have that type of intervention, then we have what we all call reprisals, and a spiraling situation which can result in multiple murders over a period of time. This is a reality in Jamaica, and I think it's one of the leading causes of murder in Jamaica is things that have happened before. Certainly in many communities in Jamaica, crime is serious crime is not primarily economic, which is a very strange concept. Yes, there's scamming, but scamming is more pervasive in some parts of the country than it is in others. And there are very violent communities where the main cause of murders in the community is not about money or any economic benefit to the murderers. It is about either retaining a certain influence in a geographic area or a reprisal for something that was done by somebody to either them or their family or somebody in the community who they had respect and regard for. So the principles of restorative justice need to be engaged on the ground, not just in the formal way that the law provides, but also in other forms of intervention. The Peace Management Initiative, that's an important institution which should not be denuded and defunded. It needs to be expanded and supported because it can play a critical role in reducing reprisals, which are such a huge source of death and violence in the country. I'm glad that when Minister Chuck took over as Minister of Justice from when we were unsuccessful in 2016 in the elections, he didn't come and find an empty platter. He found a full platter of things ready for him to just continue to work with. And to his credit, we met. I invited him to a meeting to brief him on those things, and he continued to roll out the things. So we know the restorative justice legislation, which was well advanced, could be passed into law. The child diversion legislation, which was well advanced, could be brought into law. And many other things. There are a few things that I haven't seen him come with, which I'm wondering why not. I'll mention two of them. One is the establishment of a national human rights institution in the country, compliant with the Paris principles. This is something that I first learned about at a Commonwealth Law Ministers Conference in Botswana. And the Commonwealth, the legal department of the Commonwealth was promoting the idea of national human rights institutions being established in Commonwealth countries to monitor and hold governments and state actors accountable for the human rights record within the country. And we went through a significant amount of work to develop that concept for Jamaica. Because we're a small island developing state, the model of a hybrid institution was seen to be appropriate, rather than try to create a whole new institution. And I see they're doing that in the Ministry of Justice, where they've taken out a good part of it to create a whole new ministry. But that wasn't the model we were following. We were following a model where the Office of the Public Defender and their mandate would be expanded and they would become a national human rights institution. The Paris principles guide these institutions internationally and are really about independence, about transparency, about accountability, and so on. We did the focus groups, review of the proposed policy document, Cabinet approved all that, and that was, I thought, something that was going to come into being. I don't hear nothing about it again, and I'm wondering why. I would like to see that brought forward, because I think it's important for Jamaica. We were one of the first countries to pursue human rights at the international level. It was, in fact, I think, under Hugh Shearer, Xavier, that the human rights was recognized first by the United Nations in terms of a year or a day or whatever it is, some way of recognizing it in the late 1960s. So, you know, we have a history of being promoters of human rights, despite the fact that our society has so much inequity and unfairness and injustice in it. And we need national institutions that will support that. It worries me when I see some of the NGO community really so withdrawn and ineffective compared to what they were like in times gone by. And we really need independent institutions that stand up for these issues. And because, you know, perspective is a hell of a thing. When you're in government, you're seeing glass in a particular way. And when you're outside, you're seeing it in a different way. And both perspectives are really important in terms of balance and trying to build a more noble and fair society. Injustice can be the outcome of procedural errors. For example, the Disaster Risk Management Act. I was very involved in the development of that law too. It was passed when we were in government for the Ministry of Local Government. It was really designed for dealing with calamities that Jamaica had been accustomed to suffering from, hurricanes in particular, major disruptive events from acts of God. But it provided a framework which was broad enough to be the main legislative tool used by the government when the pandemic came in 2020. But the regime that it allows for are orders made by the Prime Minister to govern how we behave in response to the calamity or disaster. Those orders do not require parliamentary approval. They are orders that the Prime Minister himself makes. And in fact, in February last year, there was an adjustment to the Act that would allow for ticketing for breaches of those orders. And the criminalization of the breach of those orders, which was not previously provided for in the law. I warned that at the time, if you allow those orders to be criminalized, then you're really delegating to the executive the power to make law, criminal law. And I said that was dangerous. Now, what has happened since is that the ticketing system didn't come into effect. But the basic provision, the default provision for breaches of the statute is what the courts now administer, which provides for fines of up to $1 million and periods of incarceration of up to, I can't remember, 6 months or a year. So issues like not wearing a mask, which were supposed to be ticketable for a modest fine without a criminal record, end up being treated by the courts under that default provision. And I've seen reports of judges giving fines of over $200,000 for people who don't wear a mask or violate the curfew. That was never the intention when the February amendments were made. We were given the assurance that the ticketing system would apply, and those fines have been prescribed in regulations. But the technology to make the ticketing system work, apparently, was not in step. And so the ticketing system was not being used. So when we see, for example, what happened with a minister who had to resign over a party, and the furor over that, The truth of the matter is the DPP has ruled on it, and when you check a stock, originally the exemption given to parliamentarians by the Prime Minister's orders only applied where the parliamentarian was acting in the course of their parliamentary duties. So as an MP, for example, if something happened in my constituency at night during the curfew, I could go and respond if I had to be on the ground. Somewhere along the line, that proviso was removed from the orders and it became a blanket exemption. And that is why somebody could keep a party in violation of the curfew and not create a criminal offense. You know, and I think that has been something which has been seen as another example of the inequity in the society, because so many people have been fined, arrested, and so on for what I would regard as minor breaches of the DMRA. But here we have a glaring example of persons who are exempt, when what they're exempt is nothing to, the actions that they're exempt from liability for had nothing to do with helping their constituents during a curfew, but was about flossing and braffing in a party. And we see where the UK Prime Minister is going through serious political upheaval right now for himself having participated in parties. He may even lose the work. That remains to be seen. But as I'm saying, beast of burden, donkey said the world no level. So all I'm saying is now, restorative justice is the right side of the justice system. It is the right direction for us to go. In the correctional system, sir, I look forward to it being more and more used, because we have to change the mindset of those who have themselves been victims of violence in their upbringing often, and who then become perpetrators of violence. And if we can heal them through exposure to restorative justice practices in the correctional system, then hopefully we won't have so much recidivism. We won't have so many people who leave prison and end up committing more offenses and come back. And we know we have a high percentage of that. I think restorative justice practices should be mandatory in the prison. You know, it should be part of what prisoners go through to reorient them towards a more loving approach to life as part of rehabilitation. And I think that would do Jamaica a tremendous service if we could get to that point, because we need to manage our propensity for violence. Because when you have a propensity for violence and you have all these high-powered weapons and other weapons in the hands of people, young men in particular, it is a dangerous cocktail, and we're sowing the whirlwind from that. So, Madam Permanent Secretary, Minister Chuck, now that your responsibilities have been sufficiently curtailed or reduced, you can focus even more on RJ and restorative justice. And we can see it really starting to take off. And that would be a tremendous benefit from the separation of the ministries. You know, and I know that your heart is in it because I've heard you talk. So I encourage you to pursue it with the zeal that you have been expressing so far recently in terms of banking fees. And that kind of passion behind the restorative justice program will stand us in good stead, Minister. And I applaud that. And all the personnel in the ministry and all the restorative justice practitioners who have been trained, all the justices of peace, and we have thousands of them now. Let us just be an army for using this tool of healing. Jamaica, more than perhaps any other place, needs that approach to solving some of our interpersonal problems and making this country the place of choice to work, raise families, do business, 2030 is not far away, so let's try and make it happen by then. Thank everybody. God bless you all.
Thank you so much for those words, Mr. Golding, who has to leave us at this time. But thank you, sir, for making the time and taking the time to have been here. And yes, we will endeavor, of course, to make restorative justice to be on the right side of justice. Please allow me at this time just to recognize as well Professor Harriot from the University of the West Indies. He's one of RJ's biggest supporters. I've seen him this week being at a few activities. Thank you, sir, for your support and dedication to the program. Also, I know DPP had recognized Mr. Lloyd Diston, but I will just add my voice of welcome as well, sir, for taking time out of your very, very busy schedule to be here with us. And I would also like to apologize for Honorable Mr. Justice Brian Sykes, Chief Justice, who should have been here, but unfortunately has to be on the bench. But he has asked us to extend his support for the program and wish us a very good time here of learning and dedication and committing to the program of restorative justice. At this time, I'm going to switch around the program a little bit. I'm now going to invite Honorable Xavier Main, who is here representing Dr. Harris Chung, Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of National Security, who unfortunately cannot be here, but of course is being ably represented by Honorable Xavier Main, Minister of State in the Ministry of National Security. May I invite you to come forward now?
Thank you, Madam PS Moderator. I too want to acknowledge with us today our DPP, Ms. Paula Llewellyn and other members of the head table, custodians who are here with us today, other distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good still morning. I know the moderator would have extended an apology on behalf of our Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of National Security, Dr. The Honorable Horace Chang. But I too want to convey an apology for his absence. He is unavoidably absent, and I believe at this present moment he's at the other end of the island, and I'll ask me to convey his apologies for his absence. It was stated in today's paper that on average over the last 6 years, 44,000 cases have been added to the parish court, Madam DPP, on a yearly basis. Now, for me, that was very striking because when you think of a total of in excess of 240 cases over the last 6 years, and the current construct of our court system, it explains why we have a backlog. And the Minister of Justice has made his call for an increased budget in respect of restorative justice. But the truth is that if you have 240 cases being added to your court system, the parish courts, within 6 years, it really says and suggests that there has to be an alternative to resolving matters, disputes, other than the courts. Because the backlog, that seems to be a natural progression based on how cases are added, will suggest that some matters may very well just not be heard. Some persons who actually want to have their day in court will just not be heard. And we support the call of Minister Chuck, who has pleaded that the lesser offenses, we have to find a way to ensure that restorative justice is as the pathway, the mechanism by which the lesser offenses, particularly domestic disputes, are resolved. Now, crime and violence is really a threat to our economic growth and prosperity. So we have to find and apply all modalities that may lead to an elimination, if not a reduction to a tolerable levels where crime is concerned. And as such, restorative justice provides that framework for a different understanding and appreciation, responding to crime. Let me give you an example, and I know DPP, you would have touched on it. When a witness goes before the court, she gives her evidence. She's cross-examined. After being bombarded by defense counsel, she leaves. She still feels psychologically, I've been hurt. Occasionally, prior to sentencing DPP, a judge may order a social inquiry report, at which time the feelings of the victim is brought into the picture. A court may hear how a victim feels having been aggrieved. The community, who we cannot underestimate the value of the community in these matters. The community would have seen individuals, how they would have developed, how they would have progressed over time. So the community's perspective of some of these, the offenders, how they would have seen their offenders, is sometimes not taken into account. The reintegration of offenders within communities is oftentimes not a priority. But we see that restorative justice gives us that pathway whereby the victim's feeling is taken into account. The community's involvement is regarded, and having an appreciation and an understanding of who offenders are, the reintegration process, that mechanism of bringing back persons along a path of a straight line is regarded, and that is what we get, Madam DPP, through the application of an effective restorative justice program. But I'll go to my script because we all understand that ministers do get prepared for these matters. The Ministry of National Security considers the Ministry of Justice as a key partner in treating with citizens and ensuring that the integrated approach to crime prevention and management is effective as we carry out our mandate of reducing crime and violence through varied modalities. With the aid of our police and through the Department of Correctional Services, we have been able to utilize restorative justice as a catalyst for peace and community strengthening. It is against this backdrop that the Ministry of National Security recognizes and champions the importance of restorative justice in providing a pathway for the transformation to a more secure, just, and peaceful society. And while we know of its value in aiding the courts with a backlog of cases, We also appreciate and laud its importance in reducing recidivism and helping victims, offenders, and communities to amicably resolve the aftermath of crimes committed. In other words, what we're saying is that we have to promote restorative justice. And in particular communities, we have to repel a culture of strongmanship, the dons who will apply their own justice, which goes according to their value system. And oftentimes we know that it is a means of improper pressure, threats, intimidation, fear of violence, among other things. And for this reason, I would like to point out that the department through the ministry, through the Department of Correctional Service, holds accountable everyone who finds themselves in contravention of the law. However, in holding those accountable, restorative justice is a tool that has been severely underutilized in the past. Nevertheless, we see and embrace its potential to safeguard public order and public safety by engendering a culture of peace while stimulating an environment for reconciliation and healing in the lives of victims, offenders, and their communities. Now, this is important because on average, our information, and I don't know if Dr. Thomas, you have touched on it, but the average age of persons within correctional facilities is between 22 and 25. And what this means is that we have to start promoting restorative justice practices as part of our education curriculum for youths to recognize that there are other ways of resolving disputes than through violence. I would like to use this opportunity to thank the members of the Jamaica Constabulary Force who are on the front lines, constantly responding to disputes which can be quite tedious at times. They have and continue to intervene in instances where citizens see the need for what they consider to be taking the law in their own hands. Vigilante justice. The JCF currently has 10 domestic violence intervention centers in operation right throughout the islands, through various parishes. And with the assistance of trained mediators within the JCF, the centers have become pivotal in bridging the trust gap between the police and citizens and serve as a critical tool to treat violence resulting from domestic feuds. The Ministry of National Security also acknowledges and commends custodies and justices of the peace who play a crucial role in mending the fence between aggrieved neighbors. We remain resolute in our support to the Ministry of Justice, and we applaud their strides in amending various pieces of legislation to allow certain offenses to be dealt with by the dint of restorative justice. We anticipate more collaborative efforts from early interventions, coupled with additional improvements to the policy framework in support of new strategies that serve to bolster crime reduction and increase public order and public safety in Jamaica. We look forward to continued partnership as we construct more restorative justice centers and sensitize our citizens to the importance of restorative justice in providing tangible solutions in the fight against crime, which allow us to live good. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you so much, Honorable Xavier Main, for your presentation. And unfortunately, you have to leave. Ministers are quite busy. You notice how quickly he's leaving the room. So, but thank you, sir, for taking the time out to have been here representing Honorable Horace Chang. Let me also recognize at this time our keynote speaker who joined us on the platform. She is Miss Novelette Grant, retired Deputy Commissioner of Police. Welcome, Miss Grant. So we will hear from her in a little bit. But before she comes to us, at this time I'm going to invite the Reverend O. Listen, I have a challenge pronouncing this name. So if I get it wrong, please to correct it, sir, when you get here. Reverend Obot, I-T-E, is that correct? Please come forward, sir. He will be sharing a testimonial with us at this time on the Restorative Justice Program. I got the name correct?
Oh, yeah. Thank you so much. All protocol observed. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm here this afternoon to testify to the outcome of restorative justice, which I believe our nation have done the right thing when they adopted it into the justice system. I am a Nigerian by birth, and I've been here for the past 14 years this month. And I and my wife, before she was taken away sometime last year, we've been afraid of the crime situation in Jamaica. We love Jamaica, and we compare Jamaica with Nigeria, and we have seen that Jamaica, in terms of infrastructure, governance, technology, has gone far past our own country in so many ways. But the only thing that has been lacking or has been backward has been the crime situation. And we've been worried in so many ways, trying to survive, trying to go around, relate with people. We have so many cultural shocks, but we live with it. And as a pastor, I was not afraid of doing what the Lord has called us to do. But sometime last year, I was invited through several phone calls to be a part of the restorative justice, something I did not know of. Even though I've been a marriage officer and I've been reading some things from the website of the Ministry of Justice, I did not know exactly what restorative justice is doing in our nation. And so I told Pastor Alpha Nunes that I'm going to see her in person if he allowed me, so that I could see her face to face while we talk. Most of the time, I don't like to take appointment or engagement by phone calls. So after several phone calls, I decided to stop by one day and said, I am here. What are you saying? And so she introduced me immediately into the Restorative Justice Conference that was going on. And at the end of the session, for those who were invited to share a moment, he said to all of us, how many of us are interested? I don't know whether anybody indicated interest, but I said I do. And she said, I'll call you for one of the conference. And I was called, and I shared moments right from that conference. I keep going again and again and again. In fact, like I spent 3 weeks or 3 days in a week just for the conference, and the rest of the days I used for my pastoral ministry. And I saw what happened at Tivoli Garden Restorative Justice Unit was amazing. God touched the heart of people in so many ways that at the end of the conferences, if mass did not prevent us, there would have just been all smile. They would say, indeed, we have been blessed. And I discovered something too, and I want to share with us, and it's something I've been sharing with pastors and people the past 17 years, that when you have a profession and when you have a vocation, you have to wrap that vocation with love. And without wrapping that vocation with love, you will not be able to touch the life of people. Staffs of restorative justice at Tivoli Garden have been so passionate because they wrapped their work, their conferences, and all their lives with love. And they reach out to victims and offenders with love in such a way that when they share their story, we feel empathy, we share in their situation, and we share in their stories. And we all have stories to share that can change life. And not just the story of the crime or conflicts, but stories that we have passed through in so many ways that could also be an impact or bring healing to other people's story. And I remember several times that we listened to stories being shared, and the question we asked, And I look into my life and I discover that I have passed through so many things in life that are similar to what these offenders and victims are sharing. And I shared my stories in so many ways. And I've seen how God used those moments to bring healing and closure to cases that would have been referred back to the court. And I have to stand this morning to testify that all the benefits and the goals of restorative justice works. And it should continue to be a blessing to our nation. Growing up in an African country and being in a community where we do not have a formal justice system, we depended so much on restorative justice. That's what our ancestors grew up with, resolving dispute before they go far into the court system. And who could afford the court system that they have to travel like 8 miles and 10 miles before they could access the nearest courtroom? So they call people in the community, elders in the community, and they call these victims and offenders, and they allow them to talk freely, even if they argue their cases, and then they bring closure to their cases. And many of the cases that we tried, millions of cases over the years, did not reach the court system. But each participant, the victim and the offender, and the community supporters received healing and were restored into the community. And I want to say this afternoon that Jamaica has done so much so far, the past few years that we have restorative justice, but they should do so much more to be able to sensitize and invite so many people to be a part of the restorative justice. And even the theme of this conference, crime prevention through restorative justice, is everyone's business. I want to testify this morning that I have been a part, and I've been in the trenches, like Madam DPP have said. I've been in the trenches the past 6 months, and I've seen the evidence of being involved and what I could contribute to the national development. Maybe some time ago, I used to preach in my church, and members of my congregation knows too well what I said I will not want to become. I will not want to become a judge or a justice for one reason. And the reason is that many of our judges and judges spend so much time in the courtroom for years and years, and they are not able to resolve a single crime because of lack of evidence or because the victim and the offenders are lying. And why will we punish our judges over the years by lying in the courtroom? Why will we try to deceive the court by giving evidence that are not proper and will not resolve the case? And so we punish our nation judges and judges again and again, spend sleepless nights trying to reconstruct cases in order to have settlement. And paleo-environmental reconstruction of crimes are not something that is so easy when we do not have evidence. And I've said again and again that even in our country that crimes is so rampant, I've not seen before, and maybe you have not seen before, when someone will, after finishing maybe a shootout or shooting people, will walk the community and raise up his hand and say, I may do it. I've not seen that before. If you have seen that before, let me know. Someone will walk the street and say, I may do this shooting, or I may do this. And then the case will be resolved. But you have this person taken to the court, and the person will spend the court time and our national resources in order for us to resolve it, but we cannot do it for so many years. If we can resolve conflicts at the grassroots, then we have done our best. We say that charity begins at home, and I always add that charity does not end at home. The same also with crime. Crimes and conflicts begins at home, but it does not have to end there, because it will creep into the community, and even the offender will be able to say, who is police? And take me to court, and take me to anywhere you want to go, I will go. But if we could hold them accountable and allow them to take responsibility and be so honest to themselves that they are responsible for the crime that they have caused or the conflicts that they have created in the community, then we'll be able to restore them back into our system, into our community. And so shall we enjoy peace. I want to thank God again for all of you, and I want to thank God for all of us who have been participants and contributors to the Ministry of Justice, Restorative Justice. And I ask that this be sensitized in order that more people will be involved, just like I was invited and accepted the invitation, and I'm glad to be with the family, and I'll continue to be with the family as the Lord give me the strength to do it. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for that testimonial, Reverend Obot Eti. I hope I got that correct. On the usefulness and for your of the program and your support for Restorative Justice Program. At this time, I'm going to invite Mrs. Samantha Webb to come and do the introduction of our guest speaker, Miss Novlet Grant. Miss Webb?
Good afternoon, everyone. All protocols being observed. Profile, Miss Novlet Grant, OD, JP, MA, MSc, BSc. Miss Novlet Grant separated from the Jamaica Constabulary Force August 2018 after serving for over 36 years. She left at the substantive mark of Deputy Commissioner of Police and had the privilege of serving as Commissioner of Police acting from January to April 2017. She has extensive professional and academic training. She holds a BSc in Management Studies with an honors and MSc in Human Resource Development with a distinction from the University of the West Indies, Mona, and MA in International Studies with a merit from King's College, University of London. She also holds a certificate in Applied Project Management from the University of Boston. Ms. Grant received professional training at the Jamaica Police Academy, the Perry Center National Defense University in Washington, and the Royal College of Defense Studies in London. At the Center Perry, she received training in defense planning and resource management, as well as advanced policymaking. Ms. Grant was selected to attend a one-year strategic leadership course at the prestigious Royal College of Defense Studies in London, England. She is the first member of the Jamaica Constabulary Force and one of a very few Jamaicans to have been selected for this college, which is the foremost institution of its kind that annually selects its members from over 40 countries worldwide. She also benefited from strategic leadership development from the United Nations Senior Mission Leaders Course. During her career in the JCF, Ms. Grant gained extensive, specialized, and general experience working in criminal investigations, operations, and administration. Specifically, she spent over 2 decades working at various levels of police leadership in the constabulary. She gained demonstrable experience in strategic leadership and management, organizational transformation, human rights practices, and intervention, human capital development, governance, international relations, public safety and security, gender, urban crime, and violence prevention. Ms. Grant has presented papers at a number of conferences on policing and security, both locally and internationally. The highlight of her international presentation was to the first committee of the United Nations General Assembly on the issue, how can arms trade treaty help deliver real security? Ms. Grant is a trained learning and development specialist and facilitator who designs and delivers learning and development programs and manuals, as well as facilitating workshops to address human and organizational needs. Transformative programs include youth empowerment and mentorship that teaches core life skills such as domestic, sexual, and gender-based violence prevention and intervention training. Ms. Grant is the recipient of the Medal of Honor for Meritorious Service and the Order of Distinction officer class. She's also a Justice of the Peace for the Parish of St. Andrew and a charter member of the Rotary Club of Manor Park. She's a motivational speaker and an avid reader who enjoys documentaries, listening to music, meeting and talking to people. Ladies and gentlemen, at this time, allow me to welcome Miss Novelette Grant, our keynote speaker. Thank you.
Good day, lunchtime. What a very nice time for me to come and speak. Madam MC, Madam DPP, I think they said that's Dr. Thomas. I was there talking to him and I didn't ask his name. That's bad. Terrible. That's how we are. And of course, Miss Andreen. So I'm going to let the cat and my honored and esteemed friends I see in the audience, Professor Harriet, I see Carla, I see somebody from the JCF that looks like Charmaine. Yeah, you know, mask these days, you know, yeah, I know. Everybody's incognito. So, Andreen, I think I should tell the people that I am no keynote speaker. Because she asked me on the last minute before midnight, last night. It was that bad, right? And she said, just come on with a presentation. So that's what I have. I don't know about being keynote, but it's my privilege to be here. Thank you very much for inviting me and asking me to be a part of this process. You know, she said restorative justice is everybody's business. Well, it's part and parcel of a model for crime prevention. So I'm going to be sharing with you some of the things that I saw and experienced as a police officer, being out there, not just in the trenches, but in the muck in many ways. And hopefully I get a chance to share a story with you. So basically, what I want to talk to you about is the communities that I saw and the issues that I saw. To give context, to try and persuade the listeners to recognize why we really, really need you know, all well-thinking Jamaicans to get on board with crime prevention and be active participants and not just bystanders. Because the pressing concern of all of us who are well-thinking at this time has to be the state of crime and disorder affecting our society. The prevailing question is, what can we do to effectively control crime, prevent crime, reduce crime in our community, in our homes? It is up to all of us to make our community a safer place. And that is something that I think we need to communicate a lot more to people about collective responsibility for collective security, and to get people to recognize that together we can make a difference. How to do this is a pressing question. When I was a young detective in St. Elizabeth, people used to shy away from giving evidence. When you investigate their matter, they don't want to come to court. Part of the reason DPP was because of the long drawn-out process. And people who were self-employed lost income, having to keep coming to court for simple cases that got postponed 3-4 years, simple cases of wounding. And we used to try and persuade them and chivvy them along to come to court. And then they started to tell us, I remember that distinctly, I'm afraid, officer. Can't bother. What are you afraid of? And they give you that sheepish grin of why they were afraid. But you know what was going on. Because we didn't even have anywhere at the courthouse for public to use a bathroom to get a drink of water. Lunchtime, they had to struggle to find something to eat. And those were some of the prevailing contexts. And these are some of the issues that we, as a country, we have to grapple with, PS, because those are some of the impediments to getting to where we want. And of course, the fear arguments start to become overwhelming to a point where police couldn't reassure anymore. Because you can't tell people that they are not afraid. How do you tell them that? Whether the fear was real or imagined, that was what I got as a young detective back in the 80s BC, right? It was so long ago. Yeah, BC, before cellular, yes, before cellular. It was so long ago. So there's an urgent need for families, neighbors, communities, and citizens in general to work collaboratively to address the problem that we're facing. And as a police, being in that institution, we have long recognized the need for greater citizen involvement in community safety and security issues. And without the involvement and support of the community, whatever strategies or model of crime prevention we adopt, they will have limited success. So the fact of the matter is, when we talk about it being everybody's business, you know, making communities safe and making crime prevention everybody's business, it requires us, I think, to embrace the notion that we are also policing increased insecurity on the part of people. And therefore, we must critically examine groups and the risk they pose and the cost to the community of potential victims. This is my view. In my view, will help us tailor strategies that may more effectively get us moving in the right direction. So when I look back on my years, I'm going to share with you the context that I saw from my perspective. It's not a fulsome one, but it's what I could do in the time that I have. So we know that we have experienced significant changes in the nature of crime and the sources of crime and the patterns and organization of crime and the relationships among criminals and community. And so we have community violence that encompasses, among other things, youth violence and gang violence. And then we have increased reports of gender-based violence, particularly intimate partner and family violence. And then when you look at the Jamaican gang landscape, it reveals that some gangs have endured over time and have become institutionalized. And then you have the ones that exist these are the ones that exist for decades. And they have gone through the metamorphosis of being youth street gangs, gain structure, survive, persist. And they persist even in the face of violent leadership / internal changes, and they have been able to accommodate multiple roles among the members and, most significantly, withstand environmental pressures such as very intrusive and focused policing and inter-gang conflicts. So it is also noticed, at least from my perspective, that these gangs develop distinct outlook of our culture that keeps them in play. One critical key to gang longevity, from where I stood, seems to be the extent to which the activities of the gangs support and perpetuate an alternate system of order and justice, security, Robin Hood-style economic benefits to the community. And of course, young men who are disconnected from just about everybody find haven in some of these spaces because they get a sense of power, they get a sense of economics, and they get a sense of belonging. Because we quickly say that they are born bad. When I see school youths acting out, everybody pile on them and say, them bad. Nobody asks, how did they get there? Right? They were born like that. So basically, there's nothing to do about them. That is kind of some of the attitudes that we're throwing out. So, and one of the other things that I have noticed over time, that as time progresses, it is sometimes very difficult to distinguish between gang and community. Not in all spaces, but in some spaces. I have seen it, I have walked those streets. And so, because when I interact with the people who live and experience it, and they tell me about it, it's very difficult. And I'm left with the impression that the community is the gang and the gang is the community. I could be wrong, but that is the impression I'm left with. And the less organized gangs are either the result of the degrading of some larger institutionalized gang that has splintered and fractured due to the internal and external pressure, or they are the result of a constant wave of youth with guns who come together for a time, display extreme violence in communities and then wither away. And then we have to look at the cyclical violence that we experience, again, as part of the context, because we live in a society where the eye for an eye philosophy seems to hold sway. Revenge, reprisal, retaliation, whatever you want to call it, have become normal for far too many people. Forgiveness, not so much an attribute that we want to promote. I am sorry. Big man can't tell you saying sorry because it means something, you're losing out face. Big woman can't say sorry, losing face. Taking responsibility, not an attribute that we are upholding either. So these things have become hard limits for some people, never will cross those limits. And so attempts to call out bad behavior, wrongdoing, are met with affront on one hand and justification, excuses on the other. Not to mention the wrongdoer either passing blame onto somebody else. So again, from where I stood and I'm looking back, we end up with two things, I think. Communities of risk and communities at risk. My own experience and analysis over the years have led me to view people and spaces as distinct communities in an attempt to gain some insight of the people and the space and the people-space symbiosis and the relationships that this gives rise to. I conclude that, as I said, we're dealing with that simultaneously. A community of risk, in my view, is a group of people who share common social values and life chances with a high probability to either cause or expose them and others to harm or violence or the risk thereof. A community of risk, on the other hand, I see them as the geospaces characterized by social decay, disinvestment, where the presence of competing organized criminal gangs sometimes holds sway, and gangs are individual operating as a lone wolf, and these persons generate a higher than average amount of disorder and criminal violence. So communities of risk generally become crime and disorder hotspots. And that, I mean by that, any location or geographic space that has a higher than average number of criminal disorder events that occurs in a persistent manner, or where people have a higher than average risk of experiencing criminal victimization and or disorder events. Within the communities at risk are distinctive, illegitimate success models that youths aspire to emulate. The alternate system of order, justice, and economy that they create, as I said, it provides that kind of a welfare style of benefit and security and other services to the community. Another telling characteristics in these communities of risk is a kinship and other relational ties that exist among the people. Kinship through affiliation, that is marital ties, or consanguinity, which is blood, is not always evident given the family structures in Jamaica. I walk into communities and people will say to me, based on how I talk and get on with people, 80% of people in here are related. But you go from door to door, you wouldn't know that. They're not telling you. I go in there when conflict in there and I say, oh, I don't know a relative, man. And they say, oh, you know. I say, come on. And we start talk. And we get the conversation going. I hear about whose grandmother come over and the middle passage and who would step on somebody too. From that time, that is causing the problem now. So, and so because of these relational ties, you have this multi-generational presence of families within the same space. And forgiveness becomes an issue in many other relationships that exist. And so these bonds, unfortunately, do not always produce a unifying force within the communities in the traditional sense. It is quite common to find long, long-standing intergenerational feuds and conflicts at play, which give rise to sharp divisions among community members. And so the role of the web of kinship ties should not be underestimated in the continued feuds and violence that we see playing out. And these are things that if you're going to be intervening and trying to bring solutions, you can't be unaware of this kind of dynamic. Because the need to avenge family is an unwavering passion for many of the persons who are drawn into the cycle of violence. We've had little kids being told, is so-and-so kill your father? And they get drip-fed that message every day, along with the notion that you're suffering because this person killed your father. If they didn't kill your father, this wouldn't be happening to you. We not take it. That's not made up. That's not fairy tale. We have spoken to people with those kinds of experience. And so the hate and vengeance are nurtured in the young, who are fed the steady and daily diet of the names of those responsible for the demise of family members. We have had cases where 20-odd years later somebody take reprisal or retaliate because somebody had killed somebody way back then. Or you hear a youth say, I can't wait until I become X years of age because I'm going to take vengeance. So loyalty among this group of our citizens is also a factor that fuels reprisal violence for fallen colleagues. So that takes care of what happened outside the home. But what about what's happening in the home in terms of the whole IPV and family violence? We know that that is happening. We know about the threats. We know about the sexual abuse. We know about the child abuse. We know about the elder abuse and all manner of abuse and violence that gets meted out in intimate partner relationship. So we can't ignore that. Because a lot of what happens in the home, we don't know about it until it results in violence, for the most part. When somebody can't take it anymore, they will squeal, or when somebody dies. We just sat there, somebody's parents was killed by that person. Mother and father, Justice Portmore just reported this morning. What we don't know is somebody who probably suffering from, who knows? Because, profession and so on and education does not preclude people from being the victims of violence or the perpetrator of violence. But something has to have gone wrong somewhere along the line. So gender-based violence, as you all know, serves by intention or effect to perpetrate some kind of male power and control. Usually that is where it runs. And in Jamaica, it is sustained by a culture of silence and denial of the seriousness of the health and other consequences of abuse. And, we know that it is bad. We know the global prevalence and the Caribbean prevalence and the Jamaican prevalence is bad. We know that the United Nations talk about the home being the most dangerous place for women. We know that in 2018, the UN Office on Drug and Crime reported that Jamaican women ranked second on a list of those most likely to be killed by a partner. Right? So we know that we have the problem of what is happening in the home. Rape is one of the most underreported crimes in Jamaica, largely because people are intimidated. You are the victim of a crime, and they want you to take responsibility because you can't afford to make the perpetrator go to prison. And they tell you that. Little kiddies get raped and assaulted and so on, and people put pressure. I remember one of my early cases as a detective. A little girl was raped. Little girl. And the parents took money. And it was one of the most satisfying things for us to arrest them. We caught them, and it was one of the most satisfying cases. Because that was such a little baby. Right? In my time as a detective, I investigated cases of rape that spanned actual months-old baby right up to 83-year-old victim. And people always want to pull back. I remember one of the first times I ever felt intimidated as a police was when I arrested a father for attempting to rape his own daughter. And the entire community came out because I was the bad guy. Because what's wrong with that? Nothing wrong with that. No more daughter. Oh, I get involved. I was going up the court step and I was cringing because I figured they were going to hit me in the back of my head. The way the place was crowded. And the way they were anti the action that I took. So we know. And people are not reporting rape until now. So basically, when we look at these things, we have to also ask ourselves, why should we convince people that this is everybody's business? Because of the cost. There's a cost to all this crime and violence. Right? Now, I can just share with you something that struck me when I came across it a few years ago. Where a research group looked at violence against women. I didn't gang violence, although gang violence have intimate partner violence in there. I can tell you stories about that, but we don't have time. And when I look at the total costs from conflicts, that is deaths from wars, terrorism, refugee-related costs, and economic damage, they found that it added up to about 0.2% of global gross domestic product each year. But intimate partner violence was costing the world about 25 times more. That is around 5.2% of global GDP. And they calculated that the annual cost of domestic violence internationally totals an astonishing $4.3 trillion. That's a lot of money. In Jamaica, we know that we have that cost too. The World Bank estimated that violence against women costs countries on average around 1.2 to 3.7% of GDP. And I saw some figures some years ago that say for Jamaica 2014, our figure was estimated to be 57 billion Jamaican dollars. And that was more than we spent for health that year. So think about it. Who bears the cost? The individual, the household, the community, business, government, and society as a whole. So restorative justice can play a role in dealing with gender violence too. However, it remains highly debated due to aspects relating to power imbalance to be in place. To some of these guys, one of the things that people don't know is that a number of perpetrators are very good at grooming bystanders, family, and friends to believe that they are being victimized by the perpetrator, by the victim, by their personal victim. And you can be groomed and you don't know you are being groomed. So it doesn't just take sitting down in a room and talking to people. You can be groomed right then and there. And putting victim and perpetrator in a room, you never get that victim saying anything. Because the body language and everything that perpetrator gives off warns victim, you better not say anything. Or you better go along with my line of argument. So it's over the next 25 years show that crime and violence and weaknesses in the justice system loom as major inhibitors to long-term development, which means that by failing to deal with this crisis, Jamaica runs the risk of ultimately disintegrating and being classified as a failed society. He said that 2001. Leave it to you to judge where we are. But one thing we know is halting this downward slide is critical. And in the midst of the difficulties of economic growth, improvements in education and in employment opportunities, we have to address and begin to deal with the challenges of crime prevention and reduction, and finding effective ways of energizing communities to participate in resetting community culture and behavior through appropriate awareness raising and education. That's some of what we have to do. We have to try and reduce and deter people from committing violent and abusive acts and then continuing on that path. So the reality of it is that some of what you do for the most part in RJ is basically trying to bring some form of healing, some form of for the victim, so that the perpetrator will say, I did this, I am taking responsibility, this is restitution, and so on and so forth. But it means that something already happened. Part of what we need to be doing where crime prevention is concerned is to basically start to reduce and prevent. So we have many models of crime prevention. Professor Harriet is a guru on that. He can tell you better than me. Right? And so we have to figure out a way, how do we choose a set of models that we can pull together and kind of put them in a framework where it's distinct, where we understand what it is that we're doing, where it's not just a confused mix of doing this here tomorrow and doing that the next day, where people are not certain of what it is that is out there to assist them, where they can go for help. One of the questions I asked somebody yesterday, do you know how to access the services of restorative justice? And the person said, actually I don't. So while you are doing some spectacular work on one hand, part and parcel of what you have to do is to see how you can institutionalize it in communities for them to know what you do and for people to run to you when they need help. And so you have to move to be proactive in terms of how you interact and interface with the communities. And I hope that I have made a case why it matters based on the context that I have laid out. And so that you have to, RJ will be a lot more effective if it becomes part and parcel of a cohesive, coordinated, and coherent framework. And in this framework where you have partner agencies and entities working together with clear guidelines, roles, responsibility, and accountability mechanisms. Clear goals and objective for working together in this interagency partnership is important to achieve the intervention outcomes that we seek. And remember, please, that community involvement is essential. Their input. We have a way to parachute in solutions that they didn't participate in, and then we wonder why it didn't work. And we need to ensure that we are doing our monitoring and evaluation, that our systems are up, and that we can analyze the quality of our implementation, and we can track the progress of our programs, and that we can continuously educate and train our stakeholders in collaborative partnership working. Those are some of the things that I would suggest that we think about. And remember, I'm going to tell you the story. I think I have a few minutes. I'm going to tell you the story that I promised you. But before I get into the story, just remember restorative justice, as Helen Keller said, I long to accomplish a great and noble task, but my chief duty is to accomplish small tasks as if they were great and noble. So while it might look daunting now, each day, whatever you have to do to help pull us back from the brink of this abyss of crime and violence that we are slowly descending into, treat it as if it were a great and noble task. All right? So let me quickly tell you something to try and wrap up everything that I was talking about for you to really see it at play when I talk about the gangs, the community, the family, and that context that you cannot ignore. I'm going to tell you about is a real-life case. I think so the relationship broke down totally as both women began hurling threats and curses at each other, and the malice and the provocation grew between both mothers and often involved Steve. People got killed early in the 2000s, right? Things level off. Sarah in 2008 was in a, but the whole continued provocation didn't ease. So in 2008, Sarah got into a kind of a visiting common law relationship with a man we shall call Q, who lived in another district. And for some reason, Steve and his family decided to extend the malice towards Q and began taunting him that he was Sarah's bodyguard. And so, because when he was there, they had to kind of tone down the, the provocation where Sarah was concerned. And then, sometime in 2011, we show you how persistent these people are. They actually assaulted him. He was passing their gate, and the father and the son was sitting on a bench under a mango tree near their gate. And they stepped out in the road, and and said to Q, you're saying enough to come back up here. And so the father grabbed him, and Steve punched him in the face because the father held the hand behind the back, Q's hands behind his back, and gave Steve all the access he needed to punch the man in his face. The man took his punch, left and reported to the police. They arrested and charged Q for it. Lo and behold, a few days later, of that incident, Violet, that is Steve's mom, was shot and killed. Fingers immediately pointed to a fellow called Dave from another district and allegedly a good friend of Q. Sarah and her entire household was blamed for the death of Violet, and they were threatened and they were targeted, and a whole series of violence events unfolded thereafter. It started from the stealing of a cow, for example, in 2012, that belonged to a friend of both Q and Dave, who we shall call Bobby. And Bobby is a cousin of Sarah, that is the little girl's mother. So this particular theft was perpetrated by Steve and his two cousins, Ralph and Greg. And Greg was a brother-in-law of Sarah's. Right? And Ralph and Greg obviously had to be Violet, the deceased woman, Steve's mother's nephew. So you notice the kinship ties, so everybody mix up. Steve gave the meat of the stolen cow to his best friend, a man we shall call Joe. Of course, Joe ended up getting arrested for receiving that stolen thing, right? And then, shortly after the theft of the cow, guess who was murdered? Steve. Steve's brother, Winston, blamed Bobby, the owner of the stolen cow, for Steve's death, and felt he had a score to settle for Bobby. Joe had challenged his finding the attorney's fee and felt that since he was part and parcel of a group with thief the cow, he should get some help. So he sought help from Winston and the other cousin, Ralph. They said they don't have any money. So they suggested that Joe lick out Bobby's head back and end the case. Winston, of course, reiterated that it's Bobby who caused his brother Steve's death. So Joe took the advice and sought the help of a man, we will call him Harry, who hailed from the parish capital. Harry was requested to accompany Joe to St. Jude to speak to Bobby about dropping the case. And if he refused, an ultimatum was to be delivered. Now, Joe was not so familiar with St. Jude community, but Harry was, because Harry often accompanied Q. Remember Q? Susan's boyfriend, we get thumping in face? Right. When the romance started with Sarah, guess who used to go up there with him? No, Harry. How we meet Harry? Harry and Q were cellmates at the lockups in the capital of the parish, and they became friends. Right? So now Joe had to rely on Harry to find his way to St. Jude when they went to see Bobby. Bobby was defiant, and Bobby said, I will not drop the case. He was told the consequence of refusal and remained defiant. Bobby then spoke about the incident with his mother and relatives who were living overseas. His mother begged him to be careful. Bobby sent a note to another cousin in another district about the threat because of the court case, and he said, if I am killed, these are the people responsible. Then in 2013, Steve's brother Winston went to another district to trade ganja for guns. The trade was unsuccessful, as he was robbed of his ganja and money, stabbed and hospitalized for his troubles. A month or so after his recovery, he made contact with a top gang leader in the capital. Right? And this top gang leader was a mentor to a little peanut gang when he started growing at St. Jude. And of course, Winston was affiliated with that gang, right? So the gang leader assured Winston, you can get back your money, but not the ganja. Money returned as promised. Once he got the money, he went to an adjoining parish and bought 3 guns, and they gave him a limited number of rounds for practice. Winston was ordering ammunition in the hearing of a farmer. So because this man here, guess what him and the peanut gang do? Beat up the man later and threaten him, right? He got his ammunition for his 3 guns, and of course he and the peanut gang controlled it. Meanwhile, Bobby was being super careful because of the threat against his life. The people who wanted to kill him knew that. They had to lure him to where they could kill him. So he used to sell produce. So this woman whom he sold to told him to come and collect payment at a particular location. And that was when he was killed, along with his cousin Larry. It is believed that Winston, another man from the peanut gang, shot and killed him. Larry was only shot because he's Bobby's cousin connection. So all of that I learned because we did that inquiry. Because nothing we did was arresting the violence, so to speak. The minute we found out all of this background, right away things changed in the community. When I left where I was, and other people took over from me, and I asked them, have you ever heard of St. Jude? No. You hear any report of murder there? No. So we were able, based on that knowledge and that information, to intervene appropriately and quell it. But here's what we learned basically then, to wrap up. We learned that a strong but unspoken practice of incest dominated the community. I surmise probably that is why Violet was so upset that a mere little touch and you go call police. You can't go call police in an house and we have a thing going on. You can't expose us that way. So the upsetting idea, that's my assumption, I don't know. But I could understand probably why she was outraged, because that was nothing. And then the relationships in that community was more tangled than we thought or we uncovered, because there's much more to this, but I won't bore you with it. The peanut gang members all had close kinship ties and had criminal connections within the parish and outside the parish. They had overseas connections that were willing to provide funds to purchase more guns. Death, injury, economic, and social losses occurred. The bright spot, as I said, we kind of halted the carnage that was taking place in that little space. So these are the things that you have to consider when people sit in front of you. You don't know the line of people that is at their backs. So when they sit in front of you talking about, oh yes, we want to do better and so on. You know, and I know, I'm not here to teach you about RJ because you are the practitioners. You know community involvement is critical. And you know that we have some people in Jamaica who like to tell people, what if? What if indeed do you this? It didn't happen, but that is one of the ways that we use to egg on people, to imagine the worst case scenario that this is what the person could do you. And you have to show strength because they will come do it. We've heard that. We know that. So I implore you, in those of you in the field with RJ, to really get to know the communities from which people come. Get to know the culture of the community. Partnership is important. You can't do it alone. You have to find ways and means to work with other partner agencies to use some of the knowledge you have of the principles of restorative justice, to start with being proactive in terms of preventing violence, because we have to be able to prevent it before we can reduce it. And hopefully we can institutionalize a new mindset. Jamaica and put it forward. Thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you, Ms. Grant, for those stirring words and I don't want to say stories because they're real incidents. But you see, when you have people like Ms. Grant and DPP who have been and, DPP continues in the trenches, and these criminal incidents that are happening. And after listening to that last story, I was wondering, he said, she said, who did what? I said, you know what, the easiest thing is just nip it in the bud. From the conflict start, if we're able to catch them at that point, before these incidents of reprisals escalate to several persons losing their lives, it is best that we try to do so. And also, Ms. Grant mentioned making the RJ institutionalized. It is the intention of the ministry to take RJ to every corner that we possibly can to make it become institutionalized in our homes, schools, workplaces, and wherever else the mechanism is needed. Now, let me not be the person who stand between you and lunch. I know it has been a very long morning. You have listened to several of our presenters, very good presentations. However, we have the Edna Manley College of the Visual and Performing Arts just to tap the temperature down a little while we prepare for lunch. And so at this time, Miss Colleen Douglas, Director of Marketing of the Edna Manley College of the Visual Arts, will just introduce her performers while we ask the persons who are going to be preparing lunch to stand by. After which, Reverend Bishop Pitkin, I'm going to lay hands suddenly on you and invite you to just say prayers for us after as we go into lunch.
Good afternoon, everyone. I want to share a quote from Professor Rex Nettleford. Why? Because we had two observations this week. On the 2nd was the anniversary of his death, and on the 3rd, which was yesterday, was his birthday. That the dance which finds the source of energy and control that each individual has over mind, soul, and limbs has always played a major role in the struggles for liberation and self-respect. Speaking of respect, arts is more than entertainment. It is also healing, and I dare suggest that it's perhaps one of the things we can use in restorative justice when you're engaging community. My brother, I'm going to ask that we clear this area. So I'm introducing a student to you. His name is Damani Hughes, and he is a second-year student doing a certificate in dance. What is significant and what we really wanted to share with you is that Damani is also a deaf student. So he's not hearing. So instead of cheering, we're going to ask you to give him this when he's finished. And we also ask that we pump the music up because he relies on the beat to move. So please welcome Damani Hughes.
You're broken down and tired of living life on the merry-go-round, and you can't find a fighter, but I see it in you, so we gon' walk it out. Move mountains, we gon' walk it out, and move mountains. And I'll rise like the day. I'll rise up, I'll rise unafraid. I'll rise up, and I'll do it 1,000 times again. And I'll rise up, I'll like the waves. I'll rise up, in spite of the ache. I'll rise up, and I'll do it 1,000 times again. The silence isn't quiet, and it feels like it's getting hard to breathe. And I know you feel like dying, but I promise we'll take the world to its feet. Mountains, bring it to its feet.
The man who wants to be the world's first deaf choreographer so that he can tell the world that the deaf can do anything. So we really laud him and expose him as much as we possibly can. Thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you. I don't know how to say thank you in sign language, but at least we can clap the Edna Manley School for facilitating Damani's dreams and ambitions. I just want to thank all of you who have stayed with us for the morning And DPP, I know you're a very busy lady. Want to thank you so much for coming and staying with us, and I hope you can stay with us for lunch. And we're going into lunch now. And let me say it was indeed my pleasure to have hosted you for the morning session of today's conference. Bishop Pitkin, can I invite you to come forward and say grace for us, please?
Thank you, Pierce. We have been sitting so long. It's appropriate that we stand for prayer. And I believe you heard the mention of the double murder this morning, and you can imagine that my phone has been ringing and messages coming in from early because the husband is double pastor. And so persons have been finding out from me which pastor died and where. And so I had to get on my phone and get the information. The mother is the VP at St. Andrew's Prep, and the husband is double pastor. He's not really a pastor, but he's called a pastor. What a day for that to happen in the middle of this conference. But it speaks volume of the magnitude of the work that we have to do in every district, in every, as we said from the country, my country boy, in every nook and cranny of our island. Let us bow our heads. Father, we thank you today for your goodness. With sorrowful hearts, we remember the family, a mentally deranged son, who not only committed the act, but led the police to the scene. And we think of how he feels even now, possibly in custody, and for other members of that family. And so we pray for your peace, and we pray for your comfort, and not for that family, but the many families across Jamaica that have been experiencing traumatic times. We ask you, God, to continue to guide our nation and our nation leaders, our minister and his team at the Ministry of Justice. Bless the meal to our bodies and our bodies to your service. We ask in Jesus' name. Amen.
Thank you, Costas. Bon appetit as we sit to have our meals.